the concept we are going to discuss is something related to variables, arguments, and the string operations. So yesterday we have seen how the installation happens, how to register with cloud.uipath.com. And also we have given you the link for download, direct download, as well as installation step-by-step guide too, right? So once the installation happens, like we have just gone through how your studio looks like. So after installation, we have seen how and where you can just start your process. So what are the different templates we have, how we can make an adjustments to the settings and all. So what is the present version of UiPath you have installed and all. So all these things. So we have seen up different panels like designer, properties panel, variables panel, arguments panel, activities panel. So how to install the packages. So where you can just do the data, table extraction. So what is UI Explorer? So we have seen at a very high level how the look and feel of UiPath happens, right? So today we are gonna discuss something related to variables and arguments as well as string operations. So without much delay, let's jump into the slide. And after the slight introduction of the concepts, we'll jump into UiPath directly. So hope my screen is visible and as well as my voice is audible, right?
Yes, I can. It is clear.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So the concept we are going to discuss is variables and arguments. So we're going to see what are the different types of variables we have. What is the purpose of variables panel? So what is basically the scope of variables? How the concept of arguments came into picture, and we'll just see at a very high level the gist of the difference between arguments and the variables. Right. So basically, what is the purpose of utilizing variables? So variables are nothing but a storage space where you can store some values and all of a different data types. So where you are trying to store in a container to store multiple types of data. Right? So the major purpose of utilizing variables are nothing but, so let's say that you are writing some sort of a code. In the code, there are some 20 instances where you are trying to write the company name. Okay. So earlier the company name is, let's say, that abc.com. Let's say the website of the company is abc.com. So after some changes to the particular application, it's been rebranded to abcxyz.com. So in your code, you need to just make sure that in all the 20 places, you manually go and change a particular value. Right? If we try to utilize something, a variable, instead of hard coding your particular values, so what we can do is basically you just try to change the particular company domain name only once, where either it was in 20 places or 100 places, the value will be still reflected. Right. So that is the major purpose of utilizing variables and all. So instead of hard coding values, we will try to store the values temporarily inside a particular variable. And during the course of action of your particular execution, even the particular variable might be also updated to some other values too. Right. So that's a major purpose. Like, so it makes easier to label and store data, which can be later utilized throughout the automation process. So that is one of the biggest advantage we have in the variables. Has an initial value which may change during the program to an external input, data manipulation, or passing from one activity to another. So that is what I've discussed. It's like a box that stores data. So it's nothing but it's a box named counter that tracks the number of times user clicks on an item. That's basically an example we can just try to utilize, right? So when you are trying to create some variable, these were the four things you need to keep in mind. The name of the variable, type, nothing but what type of data you are trying to store. And third one is the variable value. It's a temporary value or a default value you can store. And the scope. Scope is nothing but the validity of a particular or the availability of a particular variable inside your particular samples, right? So best practices for naming variables, basically use clear and meaningful names, use camel case, assign names in a consistent manner, keep the variable names descriptive yet short. So these were the four things we need to keep in mind. So don't go with the variable names with with very long things, or else you use short case, uppercase and lowercase. Instead, go with the camel case. So, and it's also best practice to just go with the prefix of the data type. Let's say that I'm trying to store some data related to the string. So instead, going with the first name, you try to go with like str underscore first name. So which gives some sense to the particular variable name also, like adding some prefixes, suffix to things, right? So let's now jump into our particular UiPath and see how we can just create some sort of variables and all, right? Any queries as of now? Yeah, I think we are good. So before just understanding, let me just create the process. So this is the first page where you'll be landed once you open your Studio. And yesterday we have seen that. So if you just click on help here, so you can see it's a community license. It's of 2024.2.1 version, right? Right. So let me just click on start and click on process. So let me just create a new process for our hyper automation underscore April branch. So let me just make sure it's a VB language and the compatibility. We have two things, Windows and cross platform. So compatibility is nothing but the framework compatible with the operating system of your execution environment. If you select Windows, mostly like it will be executed on the Windows machine. Cross-platform is also something where you can execute your bots even in the Linux platforms too, right? So you will have some limitations if you try to utilize a cross-platform compatibility. So mostly we'll try to go with the Windows. So let me just create the process. So once you create the process, you will have by default dependencies being created for us and with the main dot XML, XML, sorry. So the extension of the UiPath files we create here in UiPath ends with dot .xaml. So we call it as XAML files, right? So by default, you'll have main dot .xaml file, right? And one of the best practices we'll try to follow here is, let's say that you have 10 steps in the particular process you're trying to automate. Excuse me. 10 steps in the particular process you're trying to automate. Okay. So when you're trying to automate 10 steps in the particular process, you will not try to write a code in a single file. So what you will try to do, you'll try to break down your particular logic into n number of files, and you will create multiple files, and you will try to integrate those things, right? So we'll see going forward how you will try to break down and integrate all these things in the files. But so when you are trying to create a file inside your path, so we name those things as like workflows. So what is basically a workflow? So workflow is nothing but a graphical representation of your process. So you are trying to represent your process in a graphical representation, and in UiPath we call it as like workflows. We have different types of workflows here. So we can name it as sequence, flowchart, state machine, forms, workflows, coded workflows, and all these things. There are a lot of things, but mostly in real time we'll try to utilize a sequence and flowchart in a very frequent way, and also state machine. So for now, we'll try to understand what is basically the sequence and a flowchart. Okay. So when we are talking about something called a sequence is best utilized when your process is linear and simple and does not require any interaction between your activities. So let me just create a small sequence. So for our basic understanding, I'll drag and drop multiple activities inside your particular design. So firstly, I'll try to utilize a message box. And after that, I'll try to use a text file, read text file. After that, I'll try to again print a message box, right? So let's say that you have 3 steps in your particular process and it's linear in the sense like after step A, it's step B, after step B, it's step C, and doesn't require any interaction between the activities. So let's say that after step C, you again redirect to like step A. So that was not convenient here in the sequence. If it's very simple and it's linear, let's choose sequence. So that is what you need to remember, right? Now let's say like I want to utilize flowchart. So when you will try to go with the flowchart. So if your process is something bit complex and requires interaction between the activities, let's say that after having your message box, you can utilize a read text file and based on some condition, okay, or as like flow decision. So based on some condition, either I need to navigate to step 4 or else like step 5, and based on which I again try to read some data, okay, print some data, and also again I am trying to navigate to let's say from this particular step to this particular step. Okay, it purely depends here, and I'm just trying to show you the gist of why we try to utilize flowchart rather than a sequence. If your process is a bit complex and requires interaction between activities inside your particular workflow, so then we try to go with choosing a flowchart, right? So this is where and how you try to create files inside your particular UiPath Studio. Right. So now we can call a flowchart inside a sequence and a sequence inside a flowchart. It's reciprocal. We can just call those things. Right. How to call? So going forward, we'll just practice it. But this is what basic definitions of sequence and a flowchart. Now let's try to jump into our agenda where we are trying to create some variables. Right. So we have different types of variables. Let's say that if you're trying to store a single value, we can call those variables as scalar variables. Or if you're trying to store multiple data, you can just call those things as like collection variables. So here, whatever you're trying to see on the screen, like string, boolean, number, data type, were considered as scalar variables, where you will try to store a single value. So editable queue item and array were considered as something related to collection variables where you will try to store multiple values inside your variable. Okay. So coming to string variable helps to store any sequence of text. If it's a text enclosed between double quotes, we call it as a string variable. So we'll see those things. Boolean variable holds only two values, which is true or false. For decision making, we'll try to utilize. A number or integer variables store numeric values. Date or time will try to hold date and time. So let's try to see these four types of variables inside of particular workflow. Right. So I've created a XAML called variables, and if you can see under the project, so I've created multiple XAMLs, right? I've created flowchart XAML, a sequence.xaml, and variables.xaml. And if I just click on this particular file explorer, automatically it will navigate where it will be stored in documents, your path with your process name. Okay, fine. So let me just create some variables. So to create some variable, first of all, you need to click on your particular designer panel, then click on variables. So what I want to create, I want to create a variable called an str underscore var1. Okay. And the variable type by default, it will be having string. So what is the scope? For the total variables file, it was available. So what is the default value? So I'll say like hello here is my value. Right. So I've created some variable here, and I just want to print that particular thing using a message box. So what I'll do, I'll just search for the message box. So drag and drop inside my designer panel. So we need to try to make sure that it is connected to the start. So once you connect to the start only, you can execute your particular workflow symbol, right? So here in that message box, I want to pass the variables. So my variable name is basically str underscore one. which I'm trying to pass, and I'm just trying to run the file. So we have options here: debug file, run file, debug, and run. Debug file will debug the present file. Run file will execute your present XAML. My present XAML is basically the debug. Basically, your execution starts from main. If you try to click on run, so what happens? It will try to execute from the main. Debug, it will try to debug from the main. So why it is a main? So as we have earlier discussed, it is not that you will try to develop your code in a single XAML. You will try to split your code into multiple XAMLs, and you will try to invoke your codes into a main XAML. So this is where your starting point of your particular execution happens in real time when you try to execute multiple scenarios in the main. Or if you want to execute it in a single present file, you can just try to go with the run file. So for instance, every time we will try to just go with the run file. So simply your message box was just printed here with the value called hello. Right. So now like I just want to assign new value to it. Okay. So you want to update your value during the course of your execution, right? So basically your value str var1. Earlier it was hello UiPath. So now what I want to do, I want to say like hello hyper automation underscore AI. Okay. So just click on save. So once we have an updated value, right? So how to just go back? You can just see here beside assign we have variables. So which will have it. Second, we can do copy paste also. Control C, Control V. We can do that. Right. So I want to again print a variable called str variable. So earlier it was hello UiPath. Now it was like uh, after assigning it was hello hyperautomation underscore AI. Right. So we can also print that particular thing in the output panel. So we have something called write line. So what happens with the write line? So we'll show you. So in the write line, I want to still execute something called str var1. Right. So we can see here in the output panel, it shows that the execution started and execution ended. Right. It takes around like 8 seconds to complete total things until you close your message box. So here I'm trying to just print this particular message what we have in the variable str var, which will be hyperautomation AI. Right. So I'll just try to run the file. So earlier it prints hello UiPath. Now value got updated. It prints hello hyperautomation AI, and it will end. So if you can see here, the hello hyperautomation AI is printed here in the output panel, right? So we have utilized something called write line activity. So here we have seen message box. So message box helps us in printing variables or any values that was enclosed between the double quotes. Assign, where you can assign a new value to the existing variable, or you can create the variables too, which we'll see. And again, message box to just see the updated value in the right line to print the values in the output panel. So this is your output panel. So output panel will help us in understanding when the execution started and like when the execution has ended and what are the values, which will help us in understanding for the debugging, right? So this is how we can just create the variables. We have seen how to create some string variable, print something, copy something, right? So let's say that I just don't want to execute this particular message box, um, two message boxes. So what we can simply do is we can just comment out by using a shortcut key called control. If you comment out something in the code, it won't be executed, right? So let me run the file. So I have disabled this particular two activities, nothing but two message boxes. It has executed. So my value is only getting printed in the output panel, which is Hello Hyperautomation AI, right? So again, I want to enable. So you can go with Control E. So Control E is the shortcut key to enable, or else you can just simply right click where you can copy, paste, delete, disable the activity, and also enable the activities. Control D and Control E are the activities where you can convert those things, right? So this is how and where you can just create something related to string variables. And if you can see here, whenever I'm trying to create a string variable, it was every time enclosed in the double, right? So it is mandatory that if you're creating a string variable, it should be enclosed within double quotes. Okay. So that is how and where you just try to create the things. Now let's jump into another XAML file. Let me just create another flowchart which relates to integer variable. Okay. Let me just create this. Fine. So now I want to add some two values. So for that, what I'll do is I'll try to take the values from the user itself. So we have an activity called input dialog. Input dialog helps us to get the values from the user, right? So here what I'll try to write is please enter a number. So in the label I'll say enter number to perform calculations. Okay. So here the value entered. So now what I want to do, what are the number that was entered here? The value should be stored in a particular variable. To create variables, what I'll do every time? I'll just go to the variables, create the variable here, right? But you also can create the variables during your activities creation also. So shortcut key is basically control K. So set variable, right? So I'm just creating a variable called int underscore var1. Right. So I've created a variable. So if you can see here, it was of string type, but I'll just change it to integer. Right. So similarly, I'll just copy paste the same activity and change the variable type. So I'll just also rename my activities too. So I can just simply identify that this is input dialog 1 and this is input dialog 2. And where I want to change or create a new variable. So I'll say like control K int underscore var2. So by default, this particular value entered is basically string type. So that's the reason it was taking string type. But we can just change it to whatever type you want. So that's the reason I'm just trying to change it to integer 32. Okay. So now we have two values. Let's say that I have something called variable 1 and variable 2. And I want to just print that in the message box. So let me just write the values here. Since I want to print it in the message box, I'll say like addition of two numbers is, let's say I'll just use plus symbol. Okay. And I want to add two numbers, right? So what are the two numbers? It is basically int var1 plus int var2. Right. You can still see that there is an error here, which shows that the selected value is incompatible with the property type. Because message box can accept any single sort of data type. Let's say this is a string. You cannot add like plus symbol here. It's not addition. It's something like utilized for concatenation or joining two particular strings. So what you need to do is, so this is a string. So like let's say the 10 plus 20, it's 30. So 30 is considered as a what integer value. So you cannot combine integer with something related to a string. You need to convert this particular value after addition into a string here. So how you can convert? Using dot to string method. Okay. So then you can see that the error was vanished. So the error came into picture because this is something integer value and you cannot combine a string value. So both the things should be either an integer or else a string. So I'll just click on save here. So it will simply add two numbers and just print it. Right. So let's try to execute and see what happens. I'll just click on run file. So initially it will ask me for value 1. So enter number to perform calculations. I'll enter a value called 20. So enter number to perform calculations to it's a second number like 10. And addition of two numbers is like 20 plus 10 is basically 30. Right. So you can add multiple operations in the same thing. So how can you add it? So how can I do that? So let's say that I just want to print a value in the new line. So we can use a function called VBCRLF. So VBCRLF is a function which will help me to print a value in the new line. Right. So instead of addition of two numbers, what I want to do is now I just want to go with the subtraction of two numbers. So I'll copy all the things. I'll just keep it here. So subtraction of two numbers is basically int var1 minus int var2. Right. So it can be also in the single line. So just for our understanding, I have kept it in the second line. Okay. So this function VBCRLF is used so that it will be printed in the new line. Okay. So let me save and try to run the file again. So I'll keep a value called 500. And I'll just keep a value called 400. So what happens? So the addition of two numbers is 900 and subtraction of two numbers is 100. You can write multiple actions or you can perform multiple actions on the same. The only thing is that you just need to understand how the data flows and all. So here you have in the input dialog not only the option of text box, you can also have choose multiple choice values. But the thing is that it should be separated with the semicolon. So by default, you want to enter only two, let's say like I will enter values, let's say like 500, semicolon 400, semicolon 300. So these were the three default values you will try to see every time. Okay. So let's say in the same input dialog too, I'll select another multiple choice question where you need to enter the values like 300, semicolon 200, semicolon 100. Let's save this. So instead of entering the values, it will try to ask us to choose the values. Right. So earlier we are trying to like what I can say like enter the values using text box. Now I'm trying to choose the values. Let's say that I will try to choose 500 and I'll choose another number called 300. So you'll get an outcome of 800 and 200. Right. So that is how you can just also use input dialog to not only provide a text box, but also provide values using multiple choice where you need to separate values using semicolon as a separator here. So I'm using semicolon here to separate the values. Okay. So this is how you can create integer variables, and also we have used a concept called how to create the variables using shortcut keys. So Control K is used to create values with a shortcut key. Okay, variables. So not only you come here, create a variables, you can also automatically create during your activities properties panel also, and that is how you create variables. Okay. Now let's jump into a concept called data time variables. Okay, so I'll use a small message box to by default utilize the data time variables. So let's say that I want to print the date and time. Okay. So what I'll do, I'll use a function. Uh, I'll use a function data time plus. So we have something a function called now. Okay. So now is a date and time sort of a uh, default system variable where you can just add utilize. So Kiran, you're using something called now and you're trying to utilize dot to string, or else like now again you will say like what were these functions and all? Why we are trying to utilize these things? So basically this UiPath was built on .NET framework, right? So whatever functions that was available in existence with the .NET, we can definitely try to leverage the same thing. Okay. So these were the functions we will try to utilize. So let's say that I want to not only print this date and time, and I want to get only the year. Okay. So how do I get that? So plus now dot. So after getting dot, you have lots of functions related to date and time. So what I want to do, I want to search for year and I will get the year. And again, since this is the date and time and this is a string, you cannot add that. So you need to convert that to dot to string. Right. So basically you will get your data time and year. We'll also see multiple functions like a month, or it's like what's the day of the weekend and all these things. So let me just print that. So you have something called date of time. So it's 048, nothing but April 8th. Yes, and 2024 and 9th at 8. And the year is 2024. So some doubts. The chart window, let's see. How can I know all the functions available? The same thing, like so .NET is a framework, right? You can utilize .NET documentation where you can come to know about all the things. Fine. So now to add on for this functionalities, so let's try to see multiple functions too. So let's say now I want to add other things, a baby CRLF plus, because you can understand that while creating the process itself, it is asking what type of language you want to utilize. It's not asking whether you can create in Java or else like Ruby or like Python, right? It's supporting basically VB and .NET, because VB and C Sharp, because .NET supports these two languages, right? So now let's say I want to add some days, add days, add, let's say 7 days or 10 days, 10 days to present date. Okay, so how can I do that? Where you have a function called now dot add days, right? So how many days you want to add? Basically, I want to add 10 days. You can also subtract 10 days by just using -10. Okay. For addition, you can go with 10 days dot to string. Okay. So similarly, we can write multiple functions like let's say that I want to see only that date, not the time. So I want to see only the date basically. So double quotes date. So I want to see only the date and now dot too long date string. Okay. So let's see what it will try to print. So instead, I want to see only uh, what I can say, like let's say instead of I want to get only the time, long format of your time. Okay. So we can go with the now dot to long time string. Okay. Right. So these were the functions we are just trying to just utilize as of now, and we will try to run the file. So you can see here the date and time is 4th April 2024. Sorry, 8th April 2024. The year is 2024. So adding 10 days, it's 40418. So it was 8 in year, now it was 18. Okay. So long date will print. It says that it was Monday, 8th April 2024. But earlier it was printing 0408, right? But if you utilize long format, you can also get your month as well as day printed. And I want to see only the time. It shows only the time like 9:41:34. Right. So during your development, as per the business requirement, you want to validate whether in which month it was, whether it was April, June, July, August. In the date you will have something called 4th June 2024, right? So now if you utilize the earlier function, you will get only 0407 or 0406, something like that. You cannot validate those things, right? So you need to convert your particular values and then you need to compare. So that's the reason why we are trying to utilize this sort of functions to make sure that we are trying to meet our business requirements. Okay. So that is one thing. Fine. So till now we have seen about variables related to what I can say a scalar, right? You're storing only single values. Now let's try to store multiple values. So for that, I'll try to create something called array variables. So what is array type variable? Array type variable is a variable where it will try to store multiple values of a similar data type. So how you can create that? So what I'll do, I'll create an array type variable, array var. So what is a data type? Here you can search for something called array of p. Under array, what are the values you're trying to store? I'm trying to store a string values. So just click on OK. I'll use assign to assign values to my array type variable. So array var. Now you need to assign your values. To assign my values, every time you should create an array variable in the flower braces itself. So let's say that what are the values? It was Kiran, it was Pradeep, it was Nikhil, and it was Madhu. Right. So let's say that what are the values we have? We have Kiran, Pradeep, Nikhil, and Madhu. Four values we have. Right. So here the index starts from 0. So this is 0 index value, first value, second value, and the third. So though we have four values, the index basically starts from 0. Okay. So let's say that I want to print a second value, which is basically Pradeep. So how I need to do? You need to pass a particular value using array variable of index. So index of Pradeep is basically 1. So I'll pass 1 and you'll get the Pradeep value. So let's say that I want to print Pravatrudu. So you need to pass the index of 3, 0, 1 and 2, right? So it's 0, 1, 2 and 3. So fourth value is nothing but 3. So max value minus 1 is something where you want to print your values. Right? So we'll see how to print those things and how to print these things. So what I'll do, I'll just use a message box to get the count basically of your particular array variable. So to get the count, what is the function we can utilize? The array variable dot count is where you can get your count. Okay. So what I'll do, I'll select count plus dot to string because again we know why we are utilizing a VBCRLF plus. So now instead of getting count, I want to get the second value. Second value. How to get individual value? This is what we are trying to show. So to get the individual values inside your particular array variable, how you can do that? So what is the second value? So it's of array variable of 1. Okay. So array variable of 1 will give you second value. What is the second value? It's Pradeep. So to print a value called Pradeep, you can utilize that. The query is VBCRF is a mandatory to require for using date function. So VBCRF is helping us to print in the new line. So if I don't use this VBCRF, what it will happen? Let me just use that thing. I'm not using this VBCRL function. I have deleted it. Okay. So let's see what happens. See, everything is getting printed in the same line. So VBCRLF is a VB function which will help you to print in the new line in the message box. Not only in the message box, in the output panel also you want to write right line, you can also utilize there also. Okay. Fine. So we have seen how to get the array count and all these things, right? So let's say I want to print directly the value of your particular array. I want to print all the values. So what I'll do, I'll pass the array variable and see what happens. If I pass my array variable and print all the things, will it print all the values or not? It says that it's system.string only, right? Okay. So it's system.string, right? So here the bot was not able to understand, hey, it has multiple values inside that and I need to print all the values, right? In that instance, we try to use something called for each to print the values in the loop, right? I'll disable this, send the for each. What I'll do, I know that what is the list of items I want to iterate. So I'll say like array variable, array var is my variable, and I want to utilize a message box inside the body. And each time it repeats, it will try to store the value in the current text. So I'll try to store the value in the current text. Okay. So I'm trying to utilize a for each because here the bot is not able to understand, or else like UiPath will not understand it has multiple values. So I'll utilize a for each to make sure that you're trying to loop and print under each loop in the body using a message box. So what are the 4 values I have? I have Kiran, which will be printed. I have Pradeep, which will be printed. I have Nikhil, which will be printed. And Pathrudu, which also will be printed. If it has 100 items, it will print all the values. So that is what we can understand in terms of array type variable. Right. So there is one thing we also have called list variable. So what is the difference between the array variable and the list variable? Array variable value static. Nothing but when you create a variable here and assign the values, So let's say that you have 4 values. The values are static here. But when compared to using something called list variable, what you can do is you can store multiple values inside your list variable. And during execution of your particular process, you can add the values, delete the values, and the size of list variable is dynamic, but the size of array variable is static. So that is the only difference between array variable and a list variable. So let's quickly create that particular list variable too. So to create, I just need to have the values. 1 minute. Right. So we have a array list, dictionary, and array table, which we'll discuss. And coming to syntax, yeah. So this is the namespace I require. Let me just jump into here and create a variable called list variable. So to create list variable, I'll select list underscore var. So what is the type? I'll try to see here. It's data table. No, it's string. No, it's array. So I need to search for type here. So what is the type? It's system dot collections dot generic dot list. Under the list, what are the values you want to store? It's string basically. Okay. So once you see here, the variable type is basically list of strings. Right. So now I want to assign values. So what I'll do is I'll utilize here list variable. Here it shows syntax error because it's not the syntax. So we need to write a syntax like new list of string and write from values. So what are the values you want to add? Let's say that I want to add values called the UiPath. And let's say I want to add a value called AA, and I want to add a values called PA, Power Automate, and I want to value called PP, Blue Result, right? So these were the 4 values I want to add, basically, initial. Okay. And during my execution, I want to add multiple values also. So how can I do that? I'll search for activities called for list or collections. So you can add multiple values. We have something called append items to collection, right? So what is the collection you want to append items? So my variable is called list var. Okay. Under that, I want to add multiple values. So what are the values? So I will add values like hyper automation. I want to add values called AI. Okay. And I am just adding 2 values. Earlier it was only 4 values, but now it was 6 values. So we can simply use a message box to see before adding what is the count. So what is the count? We have something called list underscore var dot count. Sorry, it was count. Okay. And after adding the values, what is the count? Before it was 4, but after adding it was 6. And we'll try to utilize for each to print all the values. But instead of printing array variables, we'll try to print the list variables. Okay. Fine. So let me just try to run the file. But the same thing cannot be added when you create array variable. So you cannot use append to collection where you can add items to the collection if you create an array table. But if it is a list variable, you can add that. So you have values for UiPath, AI, sorry, AA, PA, BP, and hyperautomation and AI. Okay. So these were the 6 values you can just print. Okay, fine. So let me just create quickly data tables and wind up. Let me just create a data table here. So how we can create a data table? What is basically data table? So data table is a variable. It's a collection of variable where it can store the values in terms of rows and columns. So when there is something called a table and data, we try to utilize data table. So there are lots of data table actions. Okay, these were all the data table actions where you will going forward will understand these things. First of all, let's say that I will try to utilize build data table. Okay, and we will try to just create some few rows and columns. So let's say that I'm trying to create name. So I'm trying to create gender. And I'm trying to create a location or it's like a company. So I'm trying to build the table here, but you can also read it from an Excel and store it. Since we are understanding from the basic point, we are just trying to. So Korean gender is male. So company it's like ABC. Can I add multiple values? So Pradeep is male and this company is XYZ. So we have something called Shah. So she is female and the company is ABC. Okay. And we have something called Priya, company, male, female, and the value is XYZ. And we have something called Sudha, female, and from ABC. Okay. So how many values we have? We have 5 rows and 3 columns. The index starts from basically 0, 1, and 2. Same thing 0, 1, 2, and 3, 4. Right. So let me just store this data table created in a variable. So where we can create control K, dt1 is my variable. Fine. Now I want to print that in the message box. So to convert that, we have something called output data table, where you can convert your particular data table into a string variable. So my dt1, I want to convert that into a string variable. So control K, str dt1. Right. And now I'll use a message box because in the message box directly I cannot print my data table. You need to loop. So for that instance, I'm trying to utilize values called str data. Okay. And try to run the file. Right. So we have name, gender, company, and all these values. From this, I want to get only the male people. So only male people we have Kiran and Pradeep, right? And after that, I want to get only, let's say, female from an ABC company. How many people we have? We have Usha and Sudha. Right? These were the 2 things I want to get. In order to achieve that, what I'll do, I'll use something called filter data table. Okay. So let me take the questions here if you have any. How to delete certain value from an array? So we cannot delete. That's the reason I'm saying. But if it is something in the list, a list variable, we can delete those things. Yeah, we'll try to zoom. So let me filter data table, configure filter. So what is the value you are having? So in the DT1, I have my values. I want to filter that particular table. And where you want to store the filter data table. I want to store it in the same DT1. Okay. So what is the column you want to filter basically? I want to basically first filter a column called gender. Okay. So what is the value? It should be equals to basically female. So basically it is female. Okay. So let's try to see what is the outcome we will try to get. So instead of getting how many values? All the 5 values, I want to get only the female values. So which I'll get it from Usha and Sudha and Priya. So these were the 3 values that gets printed. Right. Can add multiple filters. First of all, we'll try to see it for like female. So we have seen Usha, Priya, and Sudha, right? So now let's say that I want to add another filter where the company is ABC, right? So how to add another filter? We'll go to filter data table, configure filter, and we'll try to simply click on plus symbol here. So what is the gender? So what is the gender? We have seen the gender. We need to now go with the company. And the company is equals to, so company is equals to ABC, right? So let me save, click on OK, and try to run the file. See here, we have got only values related to Usha and Sudha. Rather than getting all the values, we have filtered only gender as female and the company as ABC. Instead of getting 5 values, we have got only 2 values. Right. So let's try to utilize a new feature here, so which is very much important. So if we are trying to handle something related to data tables, we can write link queries. So link queries are a concept which will help us to do some manipulations on a particular data table, right? But I want to filter the same thing, but I don't know how to write the link query. How can I achieve the same task? So let's try to filter this thing. I'll try to use an assign activity. So we have a new feature in UiPath called autopilot, which will help us in trying to write the queries for us, right? In order to write the query, what I'll do, I'll try to write it in a general English language. So what I'll write, so I cannot zoom it here. Okay. I will try to write simply filter data table DT1. Okay. DT1. Sorry. Where the column gender with value female and column company with the value what is that ABC and store in data table. So this is what I try to write and hit on to generate the link query. Right. So it has generated a link query for us. Okay. So it has automatically given an expression for us. So this expression I haven't written, right? So, but automatically the UiPath is going to generate the link query for us. So it says like dt1 dot select, and this is what you can write. And if you can write something like instead of like the select method, write a link query, you can write a link query. That is so select is also part of link query. just it's writing the link variable. See here. So you have got a link variable. So DT1 as numerable where function. So this is something related to link variable. So though I don't know something related to the functions, what I was about to do, and still get those things, right? So somebody was asking, right? I don't know where I can get all this information. So I can just simply write here, let's say, generate or print something like use now system variable and print only present day, like it's Sunday or Monday. I don't know like to write that one also. So I'll try to hit and see whether it was able to generate an expression for me. Okay, I think it's already been here. Yeah, we can also write that. I'll write it in the next expression. But let's try to see and get if this particular function is working for us. So I want to store it in DT1, right? See, I have disabled the filter data table, but with writing a simple English language, I can generate the scripts required for us, and I can just do the executions also. See, I've got the same outcome here, right? So instead of utilizing the filter data table function, I can also achieve the same thing using autopilot features too, right? So that is how you can also utilize the autopilot feature. I think we have just passed a time 7 minutes to 10. Yeah, fine. So let's wind up for today and we'll just continue tomorrow. If you have any queries, please do let us know. So for now, yes, please.
అసలు ఉన్నాయి కొన్ని నార్మల్ కలుపు గడ్డు
Yeah. If you have any queries, please do let us know. Or else like we'll just wind up the session as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kiran. Thanks for your time.
Yeah. I think we are good. And we have also resolved the queries in the chart too. Yes. Fine. We are just winding up. Thank you. Thanks for your time. Please do practice. If you have any queries, please do let us know. Yes, we'll share all the materials you are getting it on daily basis in the WhatsApp group with also your recordings. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.